Hello, how are you guys doing? So I know this is not a stream or anything like that, but of course, y'all know how this works. Kraut released a brand new video and we're gonna watch it. I don't know what's about, as you can as you can hear like in the thumbnails. I guess it's something about Ukraine. The title says Kekkonens nightmare. I don't know if that's a person, I don't know if that's a place. But I know it's gonna be, I think, something about Ukraine, so let's watch, man.
This video is sponsored by Morning Brew.
Okay, bro, yeah, we know.
This video is a break from the normal schedule. I will still make the video on oligarchic.
I really wonder, what's he gonna think about that, you know, about the whole Ukraine situation?
Using the example of medieval Hungary, but with recent events I wanted to make a video about the historic shift in Europe that we are about to encounter. This video is also sponsored by Morning Brew. Morning Brew is an email newsletter. It provides you with articles, global news, hence the name. For my mornings.
I mean, I've used Morning Brew, you know, it's kind of nice. I'm not gonna lie.
In the description.
You should sponsor me, Morning Brew.
So why is this war so important politically to you?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still dealing with the sequels of COVID. It's still pretty tough, but it's just a cough now. Just if you were wondering, right?
He was an important figure in European politics. Kekkonen is the short answer. He was an important figure in European politics and basically the main architect behind the modern geopolitical structure and security architecture of Europe. If you ever want to study political science with an emphasis on Europe or get a better understanding of modern European politics, remember him and read up on him. Kekkonen was the longest-serving president of Finland and a diplomat of legendary skill. At the height of the Cold War in 1975, Kekkonen hosted a European peace conference in Helsinki. Kekkonen had noticed that at that particular time, every European leader had personal experiences of the Second World War. That the generation who had fought and suffered the Second World War were now ruling their respective countries. At the peace conference, Kekkonen successfully invoked the horrors of that war to argue to Europe's leaders that there was a duty for them to not let such a catastrophe befall.
Man, I mean, look at that. This is true. I don't think any of the politicians nowadays really lived through World War II. And even if they were extremely old, they were probably like kids, you know? So definitely pictures like this are great and sad reminder of war. And I think I've been following a little bit more the situation on Ukraine. It's still not looking good. I mean, I'm surprised, extremely surprised about how hard the Ukrainians are fighting. But, you know, just fighting against Russia, it's not something you wish to everyone, right? Especially a country that's beautiful like Ukraine.
All Europe again. And his appeal worked. The result were the Helsinki Accords. A treaty by which all European countries, no matter if Western Bloc, Eastern Bloc, NATO, Warsaw Pact or neutral, agreed to respect the borders, sovereignty and territorial integrity of every other European country. These accords cemented diplomacy as the #1 foreign policy priority of each and every single European country in its foreign policy entanglements and engagements with other European countries. And this is the foundation of the modern European security architecture. When European politics
was Russia on the Helsinki Accord?
The phrase "in the spirit of Helsinki," which is a reference to this. Basically, after centuries in which Europeans competed in creating spheres of influence by subjecting, oppressing, and invading other
And I mean, bro, we're talking literally centuries. Up to a few decades ago, you know, Europe was pretty much always at war.
Europeans, a process sometimes called the Concert of Europe, and which led to 2 catastrophic world wars, we all decided and agreed to stop. We would no longer try to force our will on others, and we would no longer attempt to create spheres of influence over our neighbors. If you wonder why you have never heard of Kekkonen, despite this important accomplishment by him, that was the point. He didn't want to become famous or win a Nobel Peace Prize. Kekkonen genuinely wanted to create a political framework and diplomatic foundation for a lasting peace in Europe. And with that in mind, he
A true
decided
hero.
to do 99% of the work and take none of the
Of
credit.
yeah, that's very
So everyone else could take credit for this peace agreement and thereby make it more likely to last and seem organic. The Helsinki Accords made a European war between nations impossible as long as all European nations abided by its principles. And that all nations of Europe have for almost 50 years. It became a foundation of European politics, and it set standards that...
I mean, there was 1 or 2 wars on the Balkans, right? And, well, the whole thing with Cyprus and Turkey, Greece. So it's not been extremely peaceful, but, I mean, not at that scale, you know? Like, now we're having Russia and Ukraine, so for sure it has
European
sort of worked
on themselves, but also abroad.
What I'm trying to say is just like it's kind of bullshit to say that, you know, it's been peaceful for the past 50 years in Europe, because it really hasn't.
Of European countries apply the principles of the Helsinki Accords in their foreign policy. It is, for example, a reason why so many European countries oppose the American blockade of Cuba, and why so many European countries refuse to join the 2003 American invasion
like, what the
of
fuck,
Iraq.
bro?
The Americans, in particular the Republican Party, came to heavily dislike this agreement. Rumsfeld infamously referred to it disparagingly as Old Europe when France and Germany refused to join the war in Iraq. But it has also been a legitimate impediment to security on at least one occasion.
Who's the winner now?
Why the Europeans didn't intervene against Serbia to stop the Bosnian genocide until it was too late. Over the decades, this security architecture had a decisive impact on Europe. It furthered the creation of the European Union, it furthered substantial cooperation in economy, education, and culture between European nations. Starting in the 1970s, it resulted in a substantial disarmament of many European militaries because we all believed that war between European countries would no longer happen. It cemented neutral countries, in particular Sweden, Finland, Austria, and Ireland, as Europe's peacemakers.
Oh, come on, Kraut, you know, Austria, because he's from Austria, right? So I guess he's plugging his own country. But hey, you know, who knows? I think Austria is pretty neutral, right?
We also tacitly agreed that Europe would not.
I don't think Austria is in NATO. Yeah, no shit. Austria is not in NATO.
Superpower in pursuit of global geopolitical power, something the French and British very disliked. We also decided that Eastern Bloc countries inherited this agreement after the end of communism, and it enshrined
we assumed
furthering economic codependence as a mechanism of ensuring peace. Meaning, if we all open our markets to each other and become economically dependent upon each other, war
There's one of them
will be
called
far less
Guam.
likely. In short, we spent the last 50 years in Europe under a mutually agreed upon peace. A peace we continuously worked on to expand and secure. A peace that figures from Brezhnev to Kohl to Mitterrand to Gorbachev to Thatcher to Yeltsin to Walesa to Havel to Schröder to Chirac to Erdogan to Kaczynski to Merkel to Sarkozy and Co. all agreed upon throughout 4 generations of European politics. And in February 2022, Putin took that agreement and tore it to shreds. If you are someone who thinks Putin had some supposedly legitimate reason to invade Ukraine, you can go ahead and formalize whatever rationalization you want. In the end, it doesn't matter. Whatever excuses for Putin that you may craft together, whatever rhetorical device you can come up with to blame NATO, the European Union, the Americans, the Ukrainians, or whoever else, it is all completely irrelevant. The one and only thing that matters to everyone here in Europe is that Putin destroyed the spirit of Helsinki. Urho Kekkonen's peace is over. This is what makes this moment so grave, unprecedented, and dangerous. We here in Europe are in uncharted territory. The foundational agreement we all had to ensure peace.
Just a feeling of that, you know, Europe hasn't been at that big of a war. Like I mentioned a few examples that weren't even wars, maybe, like there were just like smaller conflicts. This is a full-on war, and it's just pretty crazy. Like here on this part of the world, you know, the Americas, it's pretty chill. It's pretty safe. But I can't imagine living in Europe, and especially countries like Romania that are so close to the action. even Poland, that I guess people in Poland feel probably very safe because Poland is a part of NATO, and I really don't think that Russia is gonna do something about that because messing with Poland is messing with NATO, and that's basically almost ending the world. So I don't think that's gonna happen, but it's still a pretty major war, and I don't think a lot of people really realize that.
In Europe
It's an impactful moment.
And in the coming years, we are going to find out what we will replace them with. And since we in Europe are
It might not be pretty.
with systems of public accountability, the onus is also on you, my fellow Europeans, who make up 55% of my audience, to debate, shape, and vote on what you would prefer the new security structure of Europe to look like. Now, this of course does not mean that peace between European nations is dead and large European wars are imminent. What it means is that the agreements we had to ensure peace in Europe need to be reevaluated, renegotiated, and newly defined. And those things that we may have once considered to be geopolitical certainties will be called into question. And we should be wary and cautious of that.
And fight for them.
We are already seeing some consequences. Germany is rearming, and I cannot overstate how significant that is. It is a clear break.
Holy fuck, dude. Definitely, I mean, Germany, I think it's modern Germany exists since like what, 1991 or 1990. So, but Germany hasn't been armed since, that guy in the 40s or the 30s. So it's a pretty big deal to see Germany rearming again, and that's very symbolic.
80-year policy commitment of pacifism and demilitarization. Poland expanded its military spending massively. Within the next few years, Poland may have one of the largest and most powerful militaries in Europe. We all used to rely on the United States for our defense. With a Europe-wide rearmament, the American military presence in defense of Europe may be obsolete within a decade. Many Americans will initially be happy about this, but it also means that America will lose geostrategic influence in Europe. Britain, which post-Brexit wanted to step away from Europe, is now being bound back into it through the security politics of Europe. Sweden, Finland, Austria, and Ireland are openly questioning their neutrality. The neoliberal idea that markets and economic...
and this is not great. And I remember back in the Trump days... a lot of people were asking for this. And even today, a lot of Americans are like, we need to get out of NATO. We need to, get away Europe. And I don't think that's a great idea. All other countries like China are gaining a lot of influence. So you want to lose the influence you have in Europe by stepping out? I don't know. I guess it's a good idea that European countries get to rearm, sort of, to protect themselves against Russia. But it's also a little... I know this is kind of dumb, but in a lot of ways, when a country gets a bigger army, there's always someone that wants to try it, test it, and this has been most of a historical moment. And I understand that maybe this wouldn't apply 100% today, but the more weapons that are in existence, the more likely there is that someone is going to use it. And I don't know, it's just pretty scary, bro.
Further democracy and peace is now called into question. The fact that Switzerland is not being neutral in a conflict for the first time since 1814 is a big indicator of how substantial the impact of recent events are. Europe is for the first time ever united in a foreign policy and security policy commitment, and the result of that may be that Europe could emerge from all of this as a significant military and geopolitical power, which would be somewhat ironic, since Putin's goal with his war was to end America's role as the sole superpower of the world and re-establish Russia as the world's second superpower. Instead, he may have created a different second power block.
Funny, right? Interesting.
That may act as the world's second democratic geopolitical power. We are still very much in the heat of the moment. There are a lot of people cheering these recent developments. In particular, I have seen many people celebrate that Finland questioned its neutrality and considers NATO membership. And I would like to ask you all to instead take a moment to carefully reflect and consider. Consider what we could risk, consider what we may gain, and consider what we may lose. Sweden, Ireland and Austria have all used their neutrality to play an invaluable role as peacekeepers and peace negotiators. Sweden played a big role in the South African peace agreements that ended apartheid and is currently one of the most important negotiators in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Ireland's peacekeepers...
That's true, though. Now that he's talking about Sweden, I remember, I think it was like Vietnam, right? That Sweden, well, I don't know if this is the great example, but Sweden was supportive kind of like North Vietnam, which again, depending on how you look at it, that might be great. I don't think it's particularly great, but just gets to show you how Sweden really is very neutral and doesn't really care about how other European countries or America goes. The same might go for Ireland, I don't know. The same might go for Austria, I don't know, but
have played an important
they're
role
important.
in
Yeah,
like
that's
the
true,
Congo.
though.
Austria has and is continuing to play an important role in the Iran nuclear negotiations as the seat of the International Atomic Energy Agency. If these countries end their neutrality, they will in all likelihood have to give that up too. Should Europe even desire to be a geopolitical power? And if it becomes such, should it seek out spheres of influence outside of Europe? The French have argued for that, while the Germans have always opposed it. The Americans may initially be glad to see a democratic Europe with a unified security policy in defense of European democracy.
Yeah, but how would they really
those
feel?
attitudes may change as soon as Europe makes a decision that the Americans disagree with. Remember that our refusal to join the war in Iraq...
I think Europe has a very great opportunity to influence Africa just because they're so close. There's a lot of historical ties to that continent. And Africa not only is growing a lot, but China is investing a lot into Africa. So it'd be interesting to see like a sort of Cold War. I mean, it wouldn't be interesting. It wouldn't be fun. But just sort of an influence war between Europe and China in Africa. And America, how would they feel about it? Would they feel left out? Would they feel good? A lot of them, like I said, they say they want that space, that neutrality, that stop being the police of the world. But do they really, really want it? And is it the best decision for them?
20 years ago. Consider that a foundation
And
of
I don't know.
European politics and peace is economic codependency. A reason we completely opened our markets to each other is a belief that if our economies became interconnected enough, it will make war too costly to fight. Well, that is exactly what Germany tried to do with its gas and oil deals in Russia. It has spectacularly backfired. Does this now mean that economic codependency of nations is no longer a valid pathway to peace?
I mean, I don't know, guys. What do you guys think? I mean, we haven't had a major war. So on that regard, you can say that's the case. When it comes to Russia, like that hasn't stopped them before. Just earlier this year, they were involved in some protests in Kazakhstan. They had the war with Georgia. So it's not like that has worked 100% of the time. So why are we questioning it now just because it happened in Ukraine? You know what I'm saying? We have avoided a major war within the superpowers. So I think, that's something maybe, I don't know.
Do we need to reevaluate this policy?
I don't
Should we
think
limit
that's
access to
the
our
case.
markets only to democracies? An additional reason why Germany built
Maybe,
a
who knows?
dependency on Russian gas and oil is the Iraq War. As a result of that war, Germany wanted European energy needs to be separated from the Middle East as much as possible, to ensure Europe would never be dragged into a Middle Eastern war over energy as leverage. That policy has now produced the exact conflict that Germany wanted to avoid. The point I'm trying to make
and at Europe,
is,
not at the
is
Middle
that
East.
the war in Ukraine has shattered the European security architecture, and it has also shattered a considerable amount of what we thought of to be political certainties. But the war in Ukraine will also end one day, and when it ends, we will need a new security architecture for Europe. We need to discuss calmly, dispassionately, and rationally what it should be. Because it is not just meant to serve us during war, but predominantly meant to ensure peace. We are going to need a new Kekkonen and a new spirit of Helsinki, a new foundation upon which to build and guarantee lasting peace in Europe.
Oh, what an end. Cold. Let's give this video a like. That was pretty good. Just like you guys should give a like to this video. I really appreciate the support. Subscribe. This video was amazing. I hope that you guys, my European viewers, which there are a lot, I think it's almost like close to half, get to reflect on this issue. Tell me your opinions on the comments. I really want to know what do you think about all of this. I personally, well, my opinion doesn't really matter. I'm not European. But I think, well, I don't agree necessarily with everything Kraut said, but I think most of it is pretty correct or very accurate, at least with my point of view. And hopefully you guys can not only reflect on this, keep supporting Ukraine, and also, get to decide, because at the end of the day, I think there's a European Parliament. You guys can decide with your own governments what you really want to do. So let's just hope and sit for the best, really.